There's something about lighthouses that always fascinated me. The isolation, the relentless waves crashing against the rocks, and the solitary light cutting through the darkness, all combined to create an air of mystery and melancholy that I couldn't resist. When I heard about the remote lighthouse offering a photography tour, I signed up immediately. We were a small group, 5 tourists and our guide, Malcolm, a grizzled old sailor with tales of the sea etched into his weather-beaten face. The day started out bright and clear as we made our way to the lighthouse, a towering, ancient structure perched precariously on a rocky cliff overlooking the tumultuous sea. Malcolm regaled us with stories of shipwrecks and daring rescues as we snapped pictures of the stunning scenery. The weather turned abruptly, as it often does by the coast. Dark clouds rolled in, and the wind picked up, howling like a beast in pain. Malcolm frowned and muttered about the unpredictability of coastal storms. He suggested we stay in the lighthouse until the storm passed. Reluctantly, we agreed. The prospect of being stranded wasn't appealing, but neither was the idea of battling the elements. The interior of the lighthouse was as foreboding as its exterior, filled with the scent of salt and age. We gathered in the keeper's quarters, a small, cramped room with a narrow bed, a wooden desk, and a dusty lantern that provided a flickering, unreliable light. The storm outside raged, making the walls shudder with each gust of wind. Malcolm lit a fire in the ancient stove and set about making us some tea. As the evening wore on, Malcolm's tales took a darker turn. He spoke of the lighthouse's last keeper, a man named Henry Blackwood, who had vanished under mysterious circumstances decades ago. According to local legend, Blackwood had gone mad, driven insane by the relentless solitude and the unending scream of the wind. He had been found dead at the bottom of the lighthouse's spiral staircase, his body broken and twisted, eyes wide open in terror. Malcolm paused, his face illuminated eerily by the flickering firelight. "Some say his spirit still haunts this place," he said quietly. "It's said that on stormy nights, you can hear his footsteps echoing through the tower and see his ghostly figure roaming the halls." We laughed nervously, dismissing the story as an old sailor's yarn. But the oppressive atmosphere of the lighthouse made it hard to shake off the chill that had settled over us. We decided to turn in for the night, with each of us finding a spot on the floor to unroll our sleeping bags. The howling wind outside made sleep elusive, and the creaking of the old building set my nerves on edge. Sometime in the dead of night, I awoke to a sound that made my blood run cold. A rhythmic, echoing thump, like footsteps on the staircase. I lay still, holding my breath, listening intently. The sound grew louder, closer, until it seemed to be just outside the door. I glanced around the room at my companions. They were all awake, their eyes wide with fear. Malcolm sat up, his face pale. "It's just the wind," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Suddenly, the door to the keeper's quarters swung open with a crash. We all jumped, and I stifled a scream. Standing in the doorway was a figure, tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a face twisted in anguish. It was Henry Blackwood, or rather what remained of him. His translucent form flickered like a candle in the wind, and he seemed to be mouthing something, though no sound emerged. The room grew colder, and I felt an icy hand close around my heart. Blackwood's ghost took a step forward, his eyes locked onto mine. Panic surged through me, and I scrambled to my feet, my mind screaming for escape. But there was nowhere to run. Malcolm stood, his voice shaking as he tried to communicate with the apparition. "Henry, we mean you no harm," he said. "We're just here to wait out the storm." Blackwood's ghost didn't seem to hear him. He moved closer, reaching out with one skeletal hand. I felt a strange compulsion to follow him, as if an invisible thread were pulling me towards the door. My legs moved of their own accord, and I stumbled out into the hallway, the others close behind. The ghost led us up the spiral staircase, the very one where he had met his tragic end. Each step was a struggle against an unseen force, a weight pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. At the top of the stairs, we found ourselves in the lantern room, the beacon's light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Blackwood's ghost pointed to a spot on the floor, and as I looked closer, I saw a small trapdoor, almost invisible against the worn wooden planks. With trembling hands, Malcolm pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a bundle of old letters, yellowed with age. Malcolm picked them up, his hands shaking. He began to read aloud, his voice barely audible over the wind. The letters were from Blackwood to his wife, detailing his growing madness and the terrifying visions that haunted him. He spoke of a dark presence in the lighthouse, an evil force that whispered to him, driving him to the brink of insanity. In his final letter, he begged his wife for forgiveness, confessing that he could no longer fight the darkness and intended to end his life. As Malcolm read the last words, the ghost of Henry Blackwood began to fade, his expression one of profound sorrow. The room grew warmer, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as his spirit finally found peace. The storm outside subsided, the wind dying down to a gentle breeze. We spent the rest of the night in the lantern room, too shaken to sleep, but feeling a sense of relief that the haunting was over. In the morning, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the lighthouse. We made our way back down the stairs, feeling like we had survived something far more dangerous than a mere storm. Back on solid ground, I looked up at the lighthouse one last time. It seemed less foreboding now, almost peaceful. As we boarded the boat to return to the mainland, Malcolm turned to us, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Not many get to say they've seen a real ghost," he said. "But now you have, and Henry Blackwood's spirit can finally rest." We nodded, still processing the events of the night. As the boat pulled away, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of closure. The lighthouse had given up its secrets, and in doing so, had set a tormented soul free. The sea was calm as we sailed away, the lighthouse growing smaller in the distance, but the memory of that night, the ghostly figure of Henry Blackwood, and the dark secrets hidden within the lighthouse, would stay with me forever. And every time I hear the howl of the wind, I'll remember the night we spent in the haunted lighthouse, where the past refused to stay buried, and the dead walked among the living. The train ride through the lush, rolling countryside of Japan had lulled us into a sense of serenity. The five of us, Jake, Emily, Sam, Lisa, and I, were on the last leg of our month-long adventure through Asia, and we had decided to take a detour to visit some off-the-beaten-path villages. Our guidebook mentioned a quaint, picturesque village named Kiyosato, tucked away in the mountains. Little did we know the detour would become a journey into our darkest nightmares. The train stopped at a small, unmarked station. The platform was deserted, and a single dirt road led into the dense forest. As we followed it, the air grew heavier, the trees thicker, until we emerged into a clearing where Kiyosato lay sprawled before us. The village was beautiful, with traditional wooden houses and narrow, winding streets. But something was off. It was eerily silent. Not a single person in sight. "Maybe they're all inside having lunch or something," Jake suggested, trying to shake off the eerie feeling. Yeah, let's just find someone and ask where the inn is, Emily added, though her voice wavered. We wandered through the village, passing houses with curtains drawn tightly shut. There were no sounds of daily life, no chatter, no footsteps, not even the sound of a dog barking. It was as if the village had been frozen in time. Finally, we spotted an old man sitting on the porch of a house. He stared at us with hollow eyes, but when we approached, he turned away, ignoring our greetings. "Excuse me," Lisa tried, but he remained silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Frustrated and uneasy, we moved on until we found what looked like an inn. The sign above the door was in Japanese, but the universal symbol for hospitality was unmistakable. Inside, the innkeeper greeted us with a bow, but said nothing. When we tried to speak to her, she only gestured towards a set of rooms upstairs. "This is getting weird," Sam muttered, as we dropped our bags in the dusty, dimly lit rooms. Night fell quickly in the village, and with it came a suffocating darkness. We decided to explore a bit more, hoping to find someone who could explain the strange silence. But as we walked through the village, we realized something chilling. There were no lights in any of the houses, no candles, no lanterns. The entire village was shrouded in darkness. As we stood in the middle of the village square, a sense of dread washed over us. We heard a faint whispering, like the rustling of leaves in the wind, but there was no breeze. The whispers grew louder, forming words in a language we couldn't understand. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, clutching my arm. Before I could answer, we saw them. Villagers emerging from their houses, moving towards us with an unnerving slowness. Their eyes were empty, their faces expressionless. "We need to go, now," Jake urged. But as we turned to leave, we found the path blocked by more villagers. The whispers intensified, echoing in our minds. Suddenly, the old man we had seen earlier stepped forward. His mouth moved, forming silent words, but his eyes conveyed a chilling message. He pointed to the ground, and in the dim light, we saw a symbol carved into the earth, a demonic sigil. Panic surged through us. "What the hell is this?" Sam shouted. But there was no time to ponder. The villagers closed in, their hands outstretched. We fought our way through them, adrenaline fueling our escape. We ran towards the forest, the whispers chasing us. The trees seemed to close in, branches grabbing at our clothes. Finally, we burst out of the forest, back onto the dirt road that led to the station. The train was still there, a beacon of hope. We boarded it just as it started to pull away, collapsing into our seats, breathless and terrified. As the train sped away from Kiyosato, the whispers faded, but the horror remained etched in our minds. We didn't speak for a long time, each lost in our thoughts, trying to process what had happened. Back in Tokyo, we researched the village, hoping to find some explanation. What we discovered chilled us to the bone. Kiyosato had made a pact with a demon centuries ago, trading their voices for protection from a deadly plague. In return, they were cursed to live in silence, their souls bound to the demon. Every 50 years, the curse required new blood to sustain it. We had been the intended sacrifice. We were lucky to escape, but the memory of Kiyosato haunted us. We vowed never to speak of it again, but deep down, we knew the curse would continue, waiting for the next unsuspecting travelers to stumble upon the silent village. Every new beginning carries its mysteries, its hopes. That's what I told myself the day I signed the papers for the old house on the edge of Willow Creek. The realtor's smile was a bit too stiff as she handed me the keys, her eyes avoiding mine, as if shielding me from some unspoken truth. The house was a bargain, a relic swallowed by time and overgrown vines. It sat on a vast plot of land, most of it wild and untamed, with a sprawling backyard that tapered into the dense woods. It was on my third evening, while clearing some of the brambles, that I stumbled upon the old well. Overrun with ivy, it was a stone circle, cold and silent, a gaping mouth leading to an unknown depth. That night, as the wind whispered through the cracks of my new abode, I heard it for the first time. Soft, almost imperceptible whispers floated through the air, an eerie siren song that pulled at the edges of my consciousness. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, listening as the voices grew just a fraction louder, a symphony of indistinct murmurings that seemed to call my name. Each night, the whispers grew more insistent, more coherent. They promised secrets, wonders hidden in the dark recesses below the well. My days were consumed by thoughts of what lay beneath, and my nights were restless, filled with dreams of shadowy figures lurking in the water's depth. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, I finally approached the well one moonless night. The air was thick with the scent of moss and wet earth. As I peered into the blackness, the whispers crescendoed into clear words. "Look closer," they urged. Trembling, I obeyed, my face hovering just above the still water. What I saw in the reflection sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't my face staring back at me, but that of another, pale, distorted, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the veil of reality. It smiled, a twisted, knowing grin that suggested it had been waiting for me. "Join us," the reflection whispered, its voice a chilling caress against my mind. "Set us free, and partake in our eternal secret." I stumbled back, heart racing, mind reeling with terror. I ran into the house, locking every door, every window. But the whispers didn't cease. They were louder now, impossible to ignore. They followed me into my dreams, into my waking thoughts. The following nights blurred into a single, endless nightmare. I stopped leaving the house, my gaze constantly drawn to the well. The face haunted me, appearing in reflections, windows, mirrors, even in my phone screen. Then came the night I could resist no longer. I walked to the well, each step heavy with dread and an inexplicable eagerness. The face awaited, its grim smile wider. "Free us," it repeated as I leaned over the edge, my hands gripping the cold stones. "And be free." I don't remember falling in. I remember the cold embrace of the water, the dark closing in, and then a burst of light. An explosion of knowledge, secrets of ages flooding into my mind. Now I understand. Now I whisper too. My face joins the myriad others in the reflection, waiting for the next curious soul to peer into the depths, waiting to share the eternal secret of the well, the endless cycle of whispers and reflections. And so I whisper, adding my voice to the chorus, beckoning the next newcomer of Willow Creek, promising secrets, promising freedom. Each whisper a hook, each reflection a lure. The well waits, as do I, forever a part of its dark, whispering waters.